are with a brand new show, so I'm going to get Simon to introduce himself, tell us the title of the show, and then we're going to get cracking. So do you want to introduce yourself, Simon?
Yeah, well, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever it may be, when and wherever you're listening to this. So my name's Simon Hill, and after much deliberation, I've decided to call the show A Blind Insight, which I hope neatly sums up the plan I've got, i.e. A blind person, me, giving my thoughts on the latest events in news and sport, although to be honest, sport will be predominantly football because my knowledge of other sports is much more limited, and also the challenges that I face as a person with a disability trying to tackle modern life, and also a segment where I'll be reminiscing about an old friend which I think seems to have disappeared from society, but I for one really hope that one day it'll come back, and we'll throw in some music in between.
Great. So tell us a bit about Simon then. Obviously, you aren't sighted. So is that something from birth, or has that arrived since birth? And how did things change, and how do you adapt to the world?
Yeah, so I was born with a condition called retinoblastoma, which is cancer of the eye. It was first diagnosed in my right eye when I was 6 months old, so that eye had to be removed. It was hoped that would have got rid of it, but unfortunately it did spread to my left eye, and then I eventually lost the sight in my left eye when I was 4, and then ultimately had to have that eye removed as well when I was 6 or 7. So I'm 38 years old, so I've been blind for 34 years thereabouts now. But I've at least got the advantage that I have at least been able to see for 4 years. So, for example, colours mean something to me when people talk about colours. But other than that, I've experienced life as a blind child and now a blind adult.
How did it affect you in terms A, of growing up, and B, in terms of your education?
Well, again, this is one of the areas where I feel I can give a good insight is I went to mainstream primary school, and where I personally had a good experience. If I was looking back on it now, or if I had my time again, I would like to have stayed in mainstream school, but I went from mainstream primary to specialist blind secondary school. I suppose the main difference was when I first started school, when the other kids were learning to read and write in print, I was having to learn Braille. So that meant a lot of time learning separately, which I didn't see as a problem, but it felt a bit like I was being singled out, which I didn't really like too much. But that's what needed to be done. But apart from that, the only other sort of main sort of area was when it came to sports, because I couldn't join in with sighted games of football or any team sports really. So I used to spend lunchtimes and kicking a football about on my own. So it was quite sort of, again, I was sort of separated in that respect. Like I say, by and large, I had a good experience of mainstream school.
And how about when you finished school and went out into the big world, for want of a better word? And how was it about? We've had ladies in from Mencap doing the Amr and Shane show, and it was quite interested in them explaining the public's attitude to people that aren't different, or they see them as different. Did you experience that growing up in terms of your schoolmates or the general public?
When so when I went from mainstream primary, where I had a few bits of bullying, for want of a better word, but nothing.
Well, you're a big lad, so I wouldn't imagine you was bullied that much.
No, well, nothing physical, but it just words. But so I'm not going to say that it was absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
But when I moved on to a blind school, if anything, I mean, the irony was that you sort of realise that life's made up of there's different levels. So obviously in mainstream it was me as the blind person, and then the sighted world. But then within the blind world, as a totally blind person, you're still sort of below people who've got some vision, i.e. partially sighted. So some of the partially sighted kids gave you grief, believe it or not. So
really, that sounds really weird.
It's all very. I mean, what is it they say? They say that people kick down, as they were. So if they, I think it's because they probably had issues as well in mainstream school, and so when they came into that environment, they saw it as they were sort of.
They were one above you. But strange.
But yeah, I mean, I struggled with boarding school for lots of reasons. A, homesickness. B, looking back now, it was very insular. It was good education wise in terms of, it had everything you needed, and whether I'd have done as well going to a mainstream school, I'll never know. But in answer to your question, when it got to sort of leaving at 18, because I stayed there for A levels as well, I even unintentionally I seemed to go against the grain, but I didn't want to go to university, which largely because I'd been away from home for best part for 7 years. I was just wanted to go home, and I couldn't really. There was nothing that leapt out at me as to what I wanted to study, and I thought, well, I don't want to go and spend another 3 years, doing something for the sake of it. And I was the only one in my year who said they didn't want to go to university, and at that point, they didn't seem to really know what to do with me. So I was basically spat out into the big world, and found that. This is again one of the topics I want to cover on the show, is because despite what people's perceptions are, the Disability Discrimination Act and all the rest of it, there is still a lot of assumptions. I don't want to say prejudice. I don't think it necessarily is, but lack of understanding, shall we say? And so you find that, for example, the classic is that, people still, if you say you're blind, they don't know how you can use a computer or a phone, and and you just think, with all the technology there is today, and all the gadgets and gizmos, that still seems to baffle people, that a blind person can use a screen reader software to use a computer and a phone. So it is hard. It's very, obviously, finding employment, keeping employment. That they're all issues I've both succeeded and struggled with. Because ultimately you're in the hands of other people. It doesn't matter. They may as well talk about it now. I've been out of work for 6-7 years, and only recently been successful in passing an interview. But people say that, if you're disabled, they've got to give you an interview and this, that and the other, which, yes, is true, but they don't have to give you the job. And at the end of the day, as long as they don't write down or publicly say, we haven't given you this job because of your disability, then you can't prove otherwise. So it's it's silent sort of judgment, and you never know whether would I succeeded at that interview if, well, in my case, I wasn't blind. And so
is that because don't you think they've got things put in place to support you or support anybody with a disability, and so they think, oh, this is going to be too much trouble. We'll give it to so and so, even though they may not be qualified for the job or as qualified for the job.
Well, this is the thing. There is systems in place, if that's the right word. But the issue is, or seems to be, for example, if you ever look at job adverts nowadays, you'll see a phrase "disability confident" all the time, and they say, we welcome applications from disabled people. We can make reasonable adjustments, etc., etc. But the issue seems to be, from my point of view, for example, I've more than one occasion, I won't name names, but more than one occasion I've applied to the same employer over the space of a couple of years, and on both occasions, the first question I've basically been asked is, well, if you're blind, how are you going to use a computer? Which, if you're saying you're disability confident, then the people who are doing the recruiting should know that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem. It's the organisation or the company may, have people in it that have the knowledge, but the knowledge doesn't get passed on down to the actual people doing the recruiting and the interviewing. So they see a disabled person come along, and they think, this will be a bit complicated or whatever. And of course, why wouldn't they just move on to the next person?
Yeah.
So I think that's the problem. I think it's within organisations, the people actually on the ground, as it were, meeting you and interviewing you and making the judgment, they aren't given the knowledge and understanding to be able to just simply judge you on your abilities and skills, rather than, well, you're blind, so how are you going to do this?
Mm-hmm. So we sort of got you working or not working, for want of a better word. So it must be deeply frustrating then, when you're an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, and even now, both from a point of view of not being given the opportunity to work, but also mentally, it must be very difficult to deal with it mentally.
Yeah, it is, and I mean, obviously these days there's a lot more talk about mental health in, excuse me, in all the different aspects of life. But I think the way I sort of sum it up or try and describe it is that with a physical disability, there's no sort of good or bad day. It's not something you can put out your mind for a bit, or some days you might not notice, or it comes out, oh, if you've had a good day or a bad day, it's always there. That there's always something you have to figure out how to get round, whether it's you get a letter in the post that's in print, and you have to that it's probably 99% likely to be junk, but you need to check anyway, to finding out planning and navigating the world and how you're going to get from A to B. And it's very exhausting, really. Some days I again, I won't name names, but even recently, when I've been having issues with the employer I've been offered a job with, I've just got to the stage sort of when trying to sort of get progress updates or explain what I need to be done and this, that, and the other. You get to the afternoon, and I just need to sleep. I'm exhausted. And that's and that's purely from having to do that. I wouldn't be having to do that stuff if I wasn't blind. I'd have started the job already, in fact.
Mm-hmm.
But rewinding to when I was 18. So many. I always think if people come out of school, college at 18, and they say, I know what I want to do, then, well, wow, that's good for you, but most of us don't, I think. It was the same for me, but of course, on top of that question, it's not about what you want to do, it's what can you do. And that's the issue, and so it took me about 3 years in the end to finally get my first job, and that was with West Midlands Police, and that was it felt like my life finally sort of started, as in, because I had an income and felt like I was doing something useful and, getting somewhere. And I think, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know it affects a lot of people who, if they don't have a job, feel, struggle with their mental health or struggle with it. But I think as a disabled person or person with a disability, I think, when I think about it, I've always been trying to sort of prove I can do something, prove I can do my bit. And when no one gives you that opportunity, you just sort of end up thinking, well, what am I doing? Sort of, there's no direction. No, you don't know how you can contribute or get involved with the world, as it were. But anyway, so I started at West Midlands Police, and I was there for about 4 years. That was an eye-opener in more ways than one. Got some funny stories to share about that. But then, as most of us do, you get to the point where, I should explain, the job was answering the non-emergency calls. So, taking literally hundreds of calls a day, transferring them to here, there, and everywhere.
Did they, just putting in, they have to adapt any equipment for you?
They did, yeah, but I was lucky with that one because there was already a blind chap working there.
Oh, right, yeah.
So that sort of paved the way for me, which, I was really, really good. So there was two of us to sort of bang the drum, and there was already his system there, so they just had to do the same for me. But yeah, basically the top and bottom of it is that I can't, as a blind person, you can't use a computer without a screen reader. It's not like if you're partially sighted, you can magnify it, have a bigger monitor, etc. But if you've got no sight, you can't. There's no way you can use a computer without the screen reader. So,
and is that something that talks to you?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So obviously, these days there is dictation software where people can tell the computer what to do and everything. But so it's essentially, rather than using the mouse, which most sighted people do to point and click, it's all used with the keyboard, and reads out what's on the screen. It's much more, but it's more complicated because certain programs work better than others with screen readers, and that's where the complication comes in with employers, because you can go into an employer and find that they use a system that you've never even heard of or used anywhere else, and it's the same with the screen reader. So if the screen reader's never come across it before, it needs to be taught what to do with it. So that's where the issues come in, and so it's a long road from being offered the job to actually getting everything you need working and up and running, to starting. But
and I suppose the same, if similar here, if there's an update on Myriad, then it's all got to be, in a way, it's all got to be adapted so that you'd be able to use the update and stuff like that. So it's more complex than just having something there that you can use, in a way.
Yeah, well, I've sat there in the office with sighted people who log on and discover that someone's, they've been messing in the background and done some kind of update, and they're like, oh, where's that gone? But they look around and they find it, and then eventually they're off again. But for me and screen reader users, it somebody simply, what to them is a real little tweak could really cause us major problems. It's just an update. If you hear there's been an update, it does give you a feeling of dread, because what have they messed with? But there is usually a way round it. You just need people to be willing to work with you, basically, and give you that, and be patient in order to help you do that. But unfortunately, the world isn't patient really anymore.
And I suppose, it's, in a way, it's become worse because everything is at 110 miles an hour and everybody wants it now and stuff like that. So it's the time that people have to, I suppose, dedicate or put to one side to try and put all these systems in place, which makes it difficult, doesn't it?
Yeah, and if I'm being honest, I think since COVID, things have sort of changed, and you don't sort of really notice it until you come. But but people just seem to have a much more lax attitude to getting things done. And let's face it, we live in a world where communication is and can be instant. So email, text, whatever. I mean, they're quick enough getting texts and emails to you to try and sell your stuff, or tell you about things that you're not interested in. But when like at the moment, I'm trying to contact people, and there's no, they don't say, oh, we'll get back to you within so and so, or you email them in the morning, leave them a message, and they don't get back to you, and you just think, well, how long does it take to write an email and just say no update yet? Or so it's very.
And I suppose there's that thing, like we experience it quite a lot, where through COVID they were in isolation and stuff like that, and they seem to now, a lot of organisations are only there 2 days a week or 3 days a week, and then there are, so you always get you send an email and it's got back on the so and so back on the so, and you just think, well, how on earth does the business exist if you're only there 2 or 3 days and accessing this email 2 or 3 days?
Well, but I've worked in customer service roles, when I've had employment, and and they never stop on about customer service, etc. But you think, well, why is it deemed to be good, and why is it deemed to be satisfactory that somebody gets in touch with your organisation and you basically tell them, well, somebody might get back to you in a week, and it's or the more thing is you ring, which has happened to me certainly on more than one occasion, and I've heard other people talk about it, but you phone up, and obviously you assume and think you're calling a call centre, but then you get through to somebody and they've got kids, dogs, in the background, or even those happen to be the ones that the doorbell goes and they're like, hold on a moment, I've just got a parcel delivering. I think, what?
Yeah.
Working from home has surely got to mean you can still be professional and and concentrate on the job in hand.
Yeah. I suppose there's been advantages and disadvantages, really, and it's changed people's work culture as well, in terms of prioritising stuff. Particularly if, as you say, they work at home. It could be, oh, I'll do this when I come. I'll come back. I'll go out for 6 hours, and nobody can get me for 6 hours. It's a strange world now, isn't it? Really.
But it's so like the job I'm waiting to start. It's after 6 months of training and probation. Then you can then do it as hybrid, which seems to be the buzz word nowadays. But to be honest, I've said, well, really, I'd rather come into the office, because that's one of the hardest things I've found since losing my last job is just not being out there involved in the world. Even if you're doing a job, but you're still not. For me, and they talk about people being isolated and lonely, etc. Well, doing a job at home, for me, it'll never be the same as going into the office and talking to people over when you're getting a cup of tea, or over lunch, or that's how you make friends and form relationships with your colleagues. Whereas if you just all have to jump on a Teams meeting at a given time, you can't be having a chat in the in the background, can you? You're just there on your computers and all listening to what's been said, and then off you go again. And so for me, I do think that
the physicality of being interacting socially with people.
Yeah, well, for me, like I say, I think it's very important, because it sounds daft, but you almost forget how to talk, because you can go a whole ages, a day or more without actually speaking to anybody. Yeah, sure, text, emails, whatever, but people suddenly ring you up out the blue, and you struggle to get talking. It's really weird.
Yeah, it's like my dad always used to shout, and it was only because he used to work on the factory floor, and I used to say, "Dad, I ain't the top of the town," and he goes, "Well, this is the way they're talking." It's because they start to shout instructions. Simon, we spoke earlier about sport. Sport's obviously very important to you. So tell us about the Sporting Connection and what sport is to you.
Yeah, well, as I sort of hinted in the in my intro, that it's mainly been football. I don't really know why, because normally you know you take into your first football match as soon as you can leave the house by your dad or whatever. But it wasn't like that for me. I'm the only person in my immediate family that got into football.
Really?
So how that happened, I don't really know. But
Do you want to say who you support?
yeah, I'm an Albion fan.
A
So,
Baggies fan.
yeah, so
Great. Oh, well, that'll please the Throssels. We've got
yes,
a show of the Throssels, which is great.
yeah, I listened to a bit of that the other day.
So how did that happen then, the Baggies connection? And
Well, it came about eventually that my granddad was a Villa fan, and my uncle, who my auntie married, so he married into the family, was an Albion fan, and they basically ended up having a sort of a bribery tug of war over me, basically. And in the end, my uncle got there first with taking me to watch the Albion play. So when I was about 7, so yeah, so as I say, you know, if you hook, sure, it's got you. So so yeah, and like I say, I didn't really have the opportunity to play football, not as in competitively, until much later in life, to be honest. Which, you know, but yeah, so I've always followed Albion, had a season ticket for 25 years now. But of course, I didn't grow up with the even thinking that it was possible for me to ever play for them. But I mean, I can go into some more detail in future shows. But long story short, basically, I suddenly went from having not really played competitive football at all up until about the age of 16, 17, to suddenly being involved with the blind England squad and setting up a blind team at Albion. So,
oh wow!
So somehow I ended up playing for my club and my country, which, you know, growing up, I never imagined that would be doable. So
That's absolutely fascinating. So have you've sort of travelled abroad and played against foreign sides and stuff like that?
yeah.
Oh, well.
Well, whereas I've been to Argentina a couple of times. The biggest, you know, the main one though was the Paralympics in Beijing.
Yeah, really. And do you get caps the same as England players get caps, or?
Not exactly the same. You get them per tournament.
Oh yeah,
which is a bit annoying, but
no,
mind you, I always think, I don't know what they do with all the caps when they get them for every single match. They must have a massive warehouse or something to put them in. But yeah, so I'm fortunate. I've got some. I've got 5, I think, 5 England caps, which I treasure. So.
Oh wow! So what's the experience of you know, sitting in the stands at a football game, in terms of what you get from it, in terms of, say, a sighted person would get from it? Is there somebody who talks to you, or?
Yeah, well, it's basically the make or break of it, really, first and foremost, is access to a commentary. So these days, with again, you know, with the disability discrimination, reasonable adjustments, football clubs are supposed to provide an in-house commentary. So and Albion do that, and then obviously also we're lucky in the sense we've also got local radio commentary. So yeah, so I tune into a commentary that way, and that's how I follow the game. But it's it's become a bit of an annoyance in recent times, because commentators seem to be developing a habit of talking about stats and other things rather than commentate on the game in front of them. And I can, you know, and if the game stopped, fair enough. But when you can hear the crowd reacting, or you're like, well, something's going on, but what's going on? But yeah, so that's how and it's funny sometimes, because I've got the commentary. Sometimes if the people I'm with can't see quite what's happened, they'll say, "What was that about?" or something. So of course I've got the commentator in my ear, and I can tell them what it was about. So
has it been that way since you were little and used to go, or did when you were little, did you have to ask people what was going on, or?
Yeah, well, the first, because I went to one game and I didn't go again for a number of years. The first game I went to, I didn't have a commentary. I was just given my uncle, I think, told me what was going on, and but I've always had a commentary, which, I mean, if you some people I think don't mind being a sort of a budding commentator, but from my point of view, I don't want to interfere with their sort. If they enjoy doing it, fair enough, but I don't want them to feel obliged to do it. So, if I can listen to the game and leave them enjoy the game the way they want to, then that's much better. But it does, it does spoil it for me, to be honest, if anything happens and I can't get a commentary. But then apart from that, it's the atmosphere, of course. It's
yeah, I suppose that's a big thing, isn't it? The sensory thing that you get from the crowd, and
yeah, I mean, it's I mean, personally, I think that atmospheres aren't quite as good as they used to be. Why that is, I don't really know, but yeah, it's all the whole atmosphere, the vibe, and the and all the other feelings. You can't see the actual game, but you take in, you still feel the emotions and take it all in this, in the other ways you can. So.
Do you see because you say you still understand colour and things like that. So do you see in your head the kits of the players? If if say it's Man United, do you see if they're playing, they're coming out in the red Man United strips? Do you actually visualise colour in that way?
People have asked me this before, and I have to sort of stop and think about it, and the answer is actually no. I don't sort of. I mean, how do I explain it? I don't know, but it's a bit like when people say, "Do I visualise what people look like?" And I say, "Well, no, I don't." To be honest, I don't sort of think. If someone said to me, "Oh, so this is what it looks like," then I'll think about it for a minute, but then I don't sort of immediately think, "Oh, that's what that person looks like," or that's what kit they're wearing, or so. No, I don't really know why, but I just don't really think about it. And of course, these days they have more than one kit, so it's information to know when they tell you what kit they're playing in. But yeah, I don't actively sort of picture the players in their kit or even what they look like and all of that.
Do you get involved in from that aspect of the Albion? As you say, you started a team there, so you're involved with the hub and things like that at the Baggies.
Yeah, I have been. In fact, I'm now about this start of this year. I've now become involved with a disabled supporters group, which is aiming to improve the matchday experience for supporters with disabilities. So. I've kind of ended up being by default ended up being the chairperson and treasurer of that at the moment. But so I'm that's something I really am passionate about. That because a lot of the time it's people say, oh, football for all and this, that, and the other, but it needs more than words. It needs action, things to be put in place, things to be organised, things to be paid for, which is usually a stumbling block. So I'm involved with this, the All Access Albion group is what we've called it. That's something I'm heavily involved with the club with working on.
And is that something that say you go and visit a ground and there's a problem, then you bring that to light and say, we've been to, I'm not going to name any grounds, and the access for so-and-so was bad, or the access for so-and-so was bad, in order to try and inform people to make a change, really.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's difficult. I mean, without going into details, there is a lot that we need to get in order at the Hawthorns first of all, before we can sort of go preaching to to other clubs. But yeah, it's essentially an information gathering exercise to understand what people find. Because again, we tend to get thrown in together, but each disability or health condition requires different things. And so, for example, how I experience a game as a blind person isn't the same as somebody in a wheelchair. And what obstacles I come across, they wouldn't necessarily come across, and vice versa. So yeah, it's just about gathering information, finding out what people feel is is lacking and needs to be improved. And again, understanding, like I said earlier about employers, it's the same thing for, well, not just football grounds, but sporting venues of any kind. It's one thing the club or the hierarchy saying, we're disability confident and this, that, and the other, but if the people, the stewards and the staff on the ground on the day aren't given that training and understanding, then it's just words. So yeah, it's just about information gathering, raising awareness, and just trying to make sure that disabled people aren't forgotten when it comes to the if they want to go to a sports event or any other kind of event for that matter.
It seemed, in the modern world, you would imagine it would be one of the focal points, wouldn't it, to start with? And yet it seems as though we aren't moving maybe as fast as people think that we're moving.
We're not, to be honest, and that's again what I want to sort of focus on, and hopefully make this show to be a voice for, because the Disability Discrimination Act was 2010. What are we now, about to go into 2024? And I think it's almost, I think the world at large, people who don't sort of come across it in their daily lives, be it for themselves or relatives, friends, they believe or seem to believe that, oh, well, there's things in place, but the truth of the matter is there isn't. And in the end, it comes down to other people doing their bit to fill the gap and get things put in place to make life more accessible for people with a disability. And the annoying thing is, and the sad thing is, a lot of the time, it is a very simple thing. It just involves a bit of time, as you said earlier, and a bit of thinking outside the box. But there's, unfortunately, for whatever reason, it seems that people think that, okay, we've got the badge to say we're disability confident or whatever, and that's all we need to do. Well, no, that's the beginning. That's like the qualification that says you're supposed to have an idea what you need to do. You then need to keep the work going and keep making sure that it's implemented.
Well, that's all we had time for in the first episode of A Blind Insight. Unfortunately, the songs that were played couldn't be included in the podcast for legal reasons, but if you'd like to hear the shows in full, then tune in to Black Country Extra on Fridays at 5 p.m. I hope you found the show interesting and enlightening, and if you'd like to get in touch to tell me about your experiences or to give me topics to discuss on Comeback Common Sense, then please contact me via my email address, which is simonhill_6@hotmail.com, and I look forward to bringing you the next episode. In the meantime, take care and stay sane.